Alright students, let's go ahead and do our last lesson here on programming with inheritance. Let's just quickly discuss getClass versus instanceof. Now, if you recall, getClass we used in our previous lesson is we used it to redefine how we've been using our equals methods. So we're going to go ahead and compare that yet again. So we're building off of those concepts, as I kind of alluded to at the end of the last video. We're going to build off of those concepts here. So instead of using those techniques from the previous lesson, sometimes it's suggested that instead of using the getClass method or our definition of equals for a class such as employee, you should instead use the following. Right. So they're saying, or excuse me, you should not use the following. So we should not use our getClass calls. Instead, the suggestion is that you should use object instance of. So checking to see if there's an instance of it. Now, this first method, of course, is how we did it last time. And this is how we said to pretty much get the class of the first object and then compare it against the class of the second object. But this right here says pretty much look at the other object and see if it's an instance of employee. Now, they're both very similar in comparison, but there is a distinct difference that we're going to talk about here. So with instance of, we need to first understand what is the difference and then which, of course, should we use. Now, at first glance, it kind of seems like we might want to just use instance of. It's a little bit simpler, and it checks to see if it's an instance of the class we want it to be. Now, the instance of operator checks to see if an object is of the type given as its second argument. So the syntax object instance of class name, which returns true if the object is of type class name, otherwise it will return false. So here's a quick example. The following will return true if the object type is of employee. Other object instance of employee. So suppose that, contrary to what we really did, we instead use instance of in our definition of equals for the class employee and also use instance of in our definition for the class hourly employee, so that the definition of equals for the hourly employee is as shown right. So here we have public boolean equals object other object, which of course remember this is not the right way to define equals here below. If object equals null, else if other object does not equal instance of hourly employee, return false. Else hourly employee other hourly employee equals other object, return super dot equals other hourly employee, and wage rate equals other hourly employee dot wage rate, and hours equals other hourly employee dot hours. Okay, so you'll notice that in here, as we said, this is not the right way because we are using instance of. We're not using getClass. Now, assuming that the equals method for both employee and hourly employee are defined using instance of, let's consider the following example here. Employee equals new employee Joe Worker, new date January 1st, 2004. Hourly employee, hourly E equals new hourly employee Joe Worker, new date January 1st, 2004, 50.50, 160. Then, with the definition equals that uses instance of, we get that E dot equals hourly E will return true because hourly E is an employee with the same name and hire date as E. However, since we're assuming that we also use instance of in the definition of equals for the class hourly employee, we also get that hourly E dot equals E returns false because E instance of hourly employee will return false. Because remember, E is an employee, but E is not an hourly employee. So if we define equals in both classes using instance of, then E equals hourly E, but hourly E does not equal E, so they're not equivalent. Now, of course, this is not a proper way for our equals method to behave, because technically, well, if one object is equal to another object, they should both be equal to each other. If A equals B, then B should equal A. Since instance of does not yield a suitable definition, therefore, of equals, we should instead stick to using getClass. If we use getClass in a similar way in the definition of equals for the class hourly employee, as we did in the previous lab, then E dot equals hourly E and hourly E dot equals will both return false. So, in summary, both the instance of operator and the getClass method can be used to check the class of an object. The instance of operator simply tests an object for type. So it checks, for example, to see if it's of the type employee. The getClass method, used in a test with either equals equals or not equals, tests if two objects were created with the same class. For our purposes, we're going to stick with using the getClass method over that of instance of. And that's going to wrap up the notes, folks. So until next time.